I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. Rafe, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Jim. Nice to be here.
How accurate are the BC provincial polls that apparently show the NDP and the provincial Liberals neck and neck?
I don't trust any of those polls, Jim, and I never have, right going back to the beginning of time. As a matter of fact, when old W.A.C. Bennett banned them back in the 70s, I guess it was, we used to hold a hamburger poll, and it was more accurate, I think, than any poll we ever got from the pollsters. I think one of the troubles is, and I'll get hell from them, but I don't think they've really modernized their questions. I don't think people are asked the question that really is the key one. And moreover, I think a lot of people in their own mind are thinking, mind your own business. I'm not going to tell you, or I'm going to give you some gup. But I am an out-and-out cynic. I mean, I've never believed them, Jim, and I don't believe them now. So I leave it at that. I think probably it is pretty accurate to say that they're pretty close. Christy's falling all over herself to try to lose, and Horgan's doing absolutely nothing to try to win, and that sounds like a 50-50 to me. But as far as the polls are concerned, you can have them.
What should Christy be saying right now that would be truthful?
Well, I don't know that there is very much she can say that's going to be very helpful. She should probably fall back on what she does best and better than most, and that's bullshit. Carry on with the nonsense about balanced budgets, and we're in great shape financially, and BC Hydro is the greatest, and all the sorts of things that are so far from the truth that you gasp when you hear them. But, and I say this, I suppose, a little cynically, but it seems to work. That's where she's at her best. She is Madame Photo Op, so I think pictures of herself smiling and telling the world how sunny it all is, I think that's the best thing that she can possibly do. The record of the Liberal government is appalling. You've caught me just in the middle of doing an article for the Common Sense Canadian, and I find that during her premiership, not quite 4 years, she has lost $76 billion. At least that's what the province has lost. And during almost that same time, actually a little bit longer, BC Hydro has lost just about the same, about $70 billion actually for BC Hydro. And so you add those two up, those two large items, and try to tell the public that we're doing well. Well, the thing is that it works. All you have to do is say we balanced the budget, and everybody forgets about it. Oh, 150 or 140 billion dollars here, and away you go. I don't mean everybody does, but enough people do that in the past it's worked for, and since it's worked once and there's nothing else to go on, that's what I think you should do now. Just bullshit us.
Well, I find it hard to believe the province can afford to help people buy homes, yet they can't afford to hire enough nurses. Well,
of course, that's the whole point, too. And, one of the things in the $76 billion that the province has gone further in the hole since Christy took over, is there hasn't been a pestilence or a great depression. Haven't had a hydro dam burst. We haven't had a calamity or something where you could look at and say, gee, that's why we had the problem. If Russia hadn't declared war on us, we'd be fine. We haven't had anything remotely like that. And to counter that, she is saying, of course, herself, we're having marvelous times. We're making money hand over fist, balancing budgets, etc. So she hasn't got any excuse for the condition that we're in. Now, the one thing she didn't do either was, quote, unquote, waste a lot of money on the mentally ill, the aged, the handicapped, the homeless, and all the rest of it. She sure as hell didn't do that. Whatever money she has in the bank, the cash is because she didn't pay that cash to where it should have gone. And I think people have to understand this. When the finance minister says, oh my God, I've got billions in the pot, that's because he didn't pay his bills. And that's because he hasn't paid down any of the debt. And that's because BC Hydro hasn't paid any of its debt down. I mean, it's a magic game. And if you and I and all the people listening could do this with our bankers and so on, it would be wonderful. But you can't do that. The banker phones you up and says, wait a minute, you can't take that round the world trip until you pay part of your bank loan back. But they don't have those constraints in the short term. So she can monkey around and say, look, I balanced the budget by putting all the tough stuff off the budget where it doesn't show up. BC Hydro, ICBC, and all those things where we've really screwed up. We've almost lost $1 billion on those two alone. I don't have to show those. I'll put them on a side somewhere, but says the finance minister, and I'll just tote up the things that are nice and convenient, where we can actually show we've made a profit or balanced our budget, and Bob's your uncle. And sooner or later, the public has got to understand this. It's an absolute sham if your kid came home newly married and said, we've just got together and decided we're doing so well, we're going to take a trip around the world. You say, well, how the hell can you do that? Oh, well, we just don't bother to pay the house mortgage, and we don't bother to make the car payment. If you take those things out of the budget, Dad or Mom, why, it's easy. And that's exactly what we do in British Columbia.
Do you think the BC Liberals will avoid town hall meetings again this election?
If I were her, I'd avoid them like the plague. I just can't imagine how any good would come of them. Public meetings are iffy for governments at the very best of times. And I've been in a government at the very best of times. And I can tell you, the opposition do a pretty good job of getting out there. And so do the media when they know the opposition is going to give the government hell. And it takes a very particular person, a kind of politician, to be able to handle public meetings in the first place. And if times are bad as they are now, that would take a genius, I think. She should go. I mean, there's no reason why she shouldn't go and face the people and answer their questions. But you're asking me a political question. And I'm saying if I were her campaign manager, I'd say stay away.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after the break.
Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Rafe Mair. Rafe, if you were John Horgan, the NDP leader, what should you concentrate on if you want to have a chance of winning the next provincial election?
Well, I think what you do is you go for the weakness. And John hasn't had to do a damn thing here. People like Norman Farrell and Eric Anderson and a number of others, I might even include myself, have already laid the basis for the big ones with BC Hydro, ICBC, that's been particularly by a guy named McCandless, Dick McCandless, and that sort of stuff. It's all there. Now, the only thing that isn't all there about it is nobody's talking about it. It's not on the agenda. And it's not on the agenda because Christy won't talk about it. That makes sense. But when it's not on the agenda because John Horgan won't talk about it, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I just don't know that people understand that our biggest crown corporation has lost $70-some billion since the Liberals actually took it over and started to work with it in 2005. And they've taken it from being a thriving, a wonderful energy company, the envy of the world, and they have bankrupted. At least it would be bankrupt in the private sector. Now, it strikes me that if you're a business type of government and you're tooting your horn on that line, you really don't want anybody to prove that that's not true. Well, it's in John's hands to prove that it's not true and demonstrate it over. They can't argue with it. This is the amazing thing about this, Jeff. ICBC, or here, they've got a monopoly on car insurance. They'll lose, I think, $200 or $300 billion last year with a monopoly. And a monopoly on energy, and they lose $70-some billion since 2005. And nobody knows about it. Nobody's saying anything. And I guess maybe one of two things have happened. Either the media is really not doing their job, and I think that's probably the real case, or people don't care anymore. But I can tell you this, and here goes the old guy talking again. If we'd had that kind of thing, 1/10 of that kind of thing happened to us when we were in government, we'd have been thrown out of office bodily. But, they're getting away with it. They're getting away with it because Horgan won't raise the issues and raise hell. He's raising the typical NDP issues, which are fine. You expect that. But he's not going to the guts of the matter. Now, let me give you a very practical example of how he's in whatever trouble he is in now. My constituency, in whatever the hell they call it, Sea to Sky, House on, it's a long name. In any event, it is ripe. It's been a pretty conservative riding, because it includes West Van, for a long, long time. But it's not that now. It really isn't. And the Squamish LNG proposed plant is a huge issue. I think there are 9 municipal councils in our constituency. Every one of those has voted 100% without any dissent against it. So there is room for somebody to come in here and take a big ongoing hot issue and run with it. The LNG issue, as far as John Horgan is concerned, is non-debatable. He supports it. He said he supports it, so he can't fight it. And it manifests itself in this rather strange way. We held a big protest, I guess it was a year ago, maybe more, about LNG, back sometime anyway. And, of course, the one thing we wanted to do was to get the NDP out here, a good spokesman or two, to speak of this thing. Well, I can tell you, Jim, when you and I were following politics, and certainly when I was in politics, it would have taken an army of policemen to keep NDP away from something like that. We couldn't get a single solitary NDP MLA to speak at this thing because they were for LNG. Now, that's a pretty big issue here. Now, whether it's a big issue in other places, I don't know. It's big enough, though, to warrant it being raised, particularly all the jaunts that Christy and the Gumshoe have taken around the world, selling it without selling anything. But it certainly is a big constituency here. We haven't even got an NDP candidate nominated here. So, when you foreclose yourself from the key issues of the moment by making silly statements, and then don't have the jam to say, whoops, I made a mistake. No, we're changing. No, we're now going to take LNG one sort of case at a time, et cetera, et cetera. Unless you can do that, well, of course you're in trouble.
How can you say you plan to represent a province if you don't even have a candidate in a riding?
Well, this is the crazy thing, and it's I just don't know why. I can tell you that a number of people in ARPA. Now, look, I live in Lions Bay. That is hardly a hotbed of revolutionaries. It's probably the most conservative part of the whole constituency, with perhaps the exception of West Vancouver. But, it is pretty conservative. We must have had a dozen people write or get in touch with Horgan, or one way or another talk to the NDP about getting a candidate here, because we think that he could be or she could be elected. And he doesn't even answer. All he does is answer with a form letter, which says he's going to answer very soon. I think I've got 7 of those sitting in my file right now without a single answer. Now, it just does not to me make any mistake. And I guess I go back to my sort of hero in these things is Grace McCarthy. And Grace is not well right now. She's listening. I hope you're getting better, love. But Grace McCarthy, not everybody's bag, but a pretty damn good politician, given an awful lot to this province and understands it. She would run a candidate in Vancouver East if, the NDP had lock, stock, and barrel on 100% of the polls. She'd run a candidate, A, to show the flag, B, because in politics you never know what's going to happen. So you can't just abandon a constituency like our constituency and say, oh, well, last time it did this. Last time was last time. This time is different. There is an issue to run with, and nobody is going to do it. The Liberals aren't going to be talking about the LNG plant in Squamish. You can be sure about that. I don't think there is a Conservative. If there's a Green, I don't know who the hell it is. So, it's open at least to get in there and take a debate where you've got the right side and run and see what happens. To not have a candidate in that sort of circumstance, to me, is absolute madness.
I almost detect the attitude from the NDP. We're content with being the opposition. Why change anything?
Well, you almost think that way. And there's always been that sort of loserism in the NDP. And remarkably enough, if you talk to them, they say, oh, no, we're the greatest campaigners in the world. Why we do this, we do that. Well, they're great campaigners, except they don't ever get elected. And they don't ever get elected because they don't have, a leader that they stick with. They don't backdoor, don't stab, particularly in the middle of elections. And B, they don't have a platform. Maybe I guess that's the right word. They don't have a platform that hits the things that people want to hear about and is flexible. You can't have an absolutely inflexible platform unless there is one key issue in that constituency and you've got to be on one side or the other of it. Other than that, LNG would be a good example. A sensible leader would say, well, we're not, we don't want to be against everything, which is what Horgan says. However, there are a lot of things about LNG we have to take a long look at. Fracking, for one thing, tankers that travel on it, atmospheric problems, dumping stuff into the water, all those sort of things we're going to have to look at. So now you're open to go into a constituency and say, yeah, we're against the LNG plant there because of this, and this. Not that we're against LNG, mind you, but we're against it for these reasons. And he can't do that. And that's why he can't come into a riding that, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but it could very well be his for the asking.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after this.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, the RCMP admits it's investigating the BC Liberals' fundraising practices, but says it won't release its report until after the provincial election. Does that smack of political interference?
Of course it does. The RCMP are under a very difficult but very important injunction. They go about and they do their work as if there was no election going on. That's the only fair way you can handle things. You can't, when you have a public trust like that, say, oh, let me take a look at the news today and see whether it will be embarrassing for this or bad for that before I start investigating. You wouldn't do that with a murder or robbery or something like that. You don't do it with something like this. You investigate it as you normally would and let the chips fall where they may. It sounds to me like somebody has had a word.
Well, I was going to say, too, with in BC, the provincial police are the RCMP.
That's correct.
Are some of our biggest cities, Richmond, Burnaby, Surrey, are policed by the RCMP. I could see all kinds of places where political influence could be made.
Well, you always have that problem, and I think the police do pretty well to stay away from the obvious influences that come to them all the time, from parking tickets on up, and I'm not going to castigate them. I think what I suspect is they've had a word in their ear, and that's tough. That's tough for the police chief, no matter where he may be. And when he makes his decision, he probably tells himself he's not being affected by anybody, but you can't help it. The premier of the province, I'm not saying she did anything, but let's just suppose that she went to the chief constable in British Columbia and had a word with him. I don't say she did, but suppose she did. That would be pretty tough to take. Put yourself in his position. What the hell are you going to do? Well, you come up with an answer that you can live with, but and you can convince yourself was the fair one, but it isn't necessarily what you would have done had that conversation not taken place. Now, again, I say I don't know of any conversations. I'm just supposing, but I suspect that words have been said, and that takes me, if I may, very quickly to another matter. We talked a moment ago about BC Hydro, Jim. I invite you to take a look at what's going on. Matter of fact, in a couple of days, I'll have an article in the Common Sense Canadian where I will list what's happened to BC Hydro since the Liberals took over. You take a look at that list and tell me that the RCMP or somebody shouldn't be looking at that for breaches of the law. Why isn't it happening? There's only one person that can make that happen. That's the Attorney General of the province of British Columbia. Why isn't she making it happen? Well, I don't say it's because she happens to be a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, but she is. Now, you can connect those dots or not connect them as you wish, but it looks like hell to see a government. Just think of this, $70 billion they've lost since 2005 in a slam-dunk business where they got clients all over the place. They've lost that, and nobody has gone and said, wait a minute, how did you do that? Did you pay too much to contractors? Were they all liberal contractors? All these various things. I'm not suggesting they are so, but they are questions that any intelligent person is going to raise. They haven't been raised. Nobody has. Now, I would say that the Attorney General is derelict in her duty in not either having a complete investigation into that or be able to stand up and say, we have looked at it from our internal ministry, looked at it very carefully, and there's nothing to go on. But to just be silent on it, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. And I just suspect that there's something rotten in the province of BC, which is many times bigger than Denmark.
Prime Minister Trudeau has proposed legislation that would change a law brought in by Prime Minister Harper that would strip convicted terrorists of Canadian citizenship if they held dual citizenship. Is that a good idea?
Tell me that again, because I'm a dual citizen, and I'm not quite sure I understand it.
Well, Rafe, I don't think you're going to be committing acts of terrorism either. But the
you
Harper,
never know.
Yeah, you never know. The Harper government brought in a law that said if you're a convicted terrorist and held dual citizenship, your Canadian citizenship would be stripped, which I imagine would mean you would be shipped back to your country of origin. And Prime Minister Trudeau wants to change it with the idea that once a Canadian, always a Canadian.
Well, I think he's right, and it's not often that I agree with him. And I know that if you come up with the actual case of a mad Muslim that slaughters a schoolhouse full of children, then everybody's going to say, see, he was wrong. But no, that's not the case. But that's a crime, and crimes happen, all colors, creeds, etc. You can't base your citizenship on that. A person has citizenship or they don't. Now, you were kind of chuckling at me. Not so. My father was born in New Zealand. I had nothing to do with that. I was born in Vancouver. The New Zealand government said very well, you're a New Zealand citizen. I had nothing to do with that either. I was told, and I went to a couple of MPs on this, that if I did commit an act of terrorism, I could be deported. Rafe wouldn't commit terrorism? Well, I not according to what I think it is, but how about marching in a picket line against something that the provincial government or the federal government is doing, and they get pretty upset about that. You remember there were some things under Harper that came very close to being called terrorism that you would say were just just ordinary things to protest. So, I felt close enough that I wrote a letter to my MP and demanded to have this cleared. And of course she didn't do anything about it, and I didn't expect they ever would. They don't do a damn thing anyway. But so it does get to an awful lot of people. I'm sixth-generation Canadian on my mother's side, but my dad, silly bugger, he got born in New Zealand, and the New Zealand government. Imagine making a poor little infant like me in Vancouver into one of their citizens. So, but that's the way it is. This law would catch people that just got off the boat and just got their citizenship 5 minutes ago, but it might also catch people who've been citizens for 85 years.
Any thoughts about giving up your New Zealand citizenship?
No, never have. It's funny. A lot of people have asked me about that, and I go back to much, calmer and happier times in the world, and I was very proud to be partly a New Zealand citizen. They're a wonderful country. I've spent a lot of time down there, and of course, the more I went down there with a fly rod in my hand, the more I fell in love with the country. I did not fall out of love with my country, not at all. If anything, it made me very happy to be a Canadian, to be a British Columbian particularly, because this is such a lovely place to live, and et cetera. But I love the country, and that they were well behaved. I was interested in their politics and so on. So no, I've never wanted to give it up. Then it got to the point where I thought to myself, the hell with them. Nobody's going to make me give up something that I've got unless I want to. If my citizenship were Afghanistani or something, that might be different. But New Zealand is a pretty good place to call home, and so the answer is no. I've never decided to give it up, and I won't.
Rafe, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Always my pleasure, Jim. Take care.
You too. My guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC cabinet minister and Canada's longest-running #1 radio talk show host. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Also check out our popular YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show can be emailed to info@HowStreet.com. I am Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.